Bendu, and I'm coming at y'all with another video. So y'all know that I covered today in another video the Convo Couch Matt Bender debate. And one of the aspects they talked about in that debate, I don't know if I talked about it a lot in that video or not, but was the DSA. So, and specifically AOC and her connection to the DSA, but just the DSA overall. Well, there were points that Matt Bender was talking about the DSA, like basically like deifying it in a sense, where the DSA has its problems, man. The fact that you had, a whole bunch of DSA members, at the March for Medicare, the Medicare for All marches, where the DSA leadership, the DSA itself wasn't, wasn't with the march. You had different sects. I forget which, there was one specific DSA chapter that endorsed the march, but the fact that the DSA overall didn't endorse the march because they're going in lockstep with the Democratic Party, the Justice Democrats, and the squad overall. They're keeping in lockstep with politicians instead of the people. And honestly, look, they use Jimmy Dore. He brought up Jimmy Dore in the debate as well. They use Jimmy Dore as a bad idea. If Jimmy Dore is involved in any way, shape, or form, or his fans, it's probably a bad idea. Where it's like, again, and this is the point that he pushed back on in a debate. Jimmy Dore says a lot of the things the working class people say. And he tried to bring up, well, I don't think a multi-millionaire entertainer. It was like, do you never listen to anything he talks about, his past on his show? You obviously don't, and it's like Jimmy Dore comes from a working class background, working class, middle class family background. So the lower middle class, I believe Jimmy described it as. So, it's just very weird to see that happen. But again, this is what they do. This is what the establishment does. This is, DSA, the majority reports, TYT, and now, a lot of people like David Dole, Humanist Report, and some more are starting to go into that establishment light type of lane. And it sucks to see, but it is what it is, And I used to love those guys' show. I used to love David Dole's show. I used to love Humanist Report. And I still watch their show from time to time. I check out a video here and there when they're talking about something outside of, our disagreements. Because I still do think they have some, value and merit to talk about, like to bring people information. Because, some people may not like Jimmy's style. If I was to play them like a Kyle Kalinske video, some people like that. I've played the, more of my, friends, my working friends that I've met at work or like, different coworkers I've met. I showed them Jimmy Dore. They love Jimmy Dore. But there has been like some of my family members, that I've showed videos of Kyle to, and different people. So it's different strokes for different folks. But the overall point I wanted to get to DSA about was how the DSA constantly capitulates to power. And that's what we're going to be covering today in this World Socialist website, Patrick Martin article. So let's go ahead and get it. So here it is. The Democratic Socialists of America providing a left cover for a right-wing Democratic Party. And this is by Patrick Martin, and it's from July of 2018. Under conditions where the Democratic Party is openly aligned with the CIA, FBI, and other national security agencies and the McCarthyite campaign charging the Trump White House with being an outpost of the Kremlin, the pseudo-left group Democratic Socialists of America is seeking to provide a left cover. Leading Democrats and their media apologists have sought to use the June 26 primary victory of AOC, a DSA member, who defeated incumbent Democratic Representative Joseph Crowley, which again, I've talked about on my channel. It's very weird circumstances around that. Apparently from what I've read and from what I've seen, Joseph Crowley was planning on running against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, and he was planning on basically ousting her as Speaker of the House. So it's very weird that Nancy Pelosi's opponent, when he decides to try and take her spot, when he guns for her spot, he loses to, basically a virtual, not, a nobody like AOC, which not calling her a nobody just, disparagingly, but, a nobody like AOC that nobody knew of in the establishment media and shit like that. But given her past, her past internships and, everything else about her past, she probably knew she had some connections to the political world, obviously, especially within the DSA. And I've covered the history of the DSA, and just go watch that video. I might link it at the end, or tag it here. But yeah, so very weird circumstances surrounding that, and where people like Paula Jean lost, that she was in that documentary and shit like that. So very weird. To give the impression that the Democratic Party is moving to the left and embracing positions of unheard of radicalism on healthcare, education, immigration, and the minimum wage. Ocasio-Cortez has made the rounds of Sunday television interview programs, cable programs, late-night network television, and received by her own account more than 1,000 requests for interviews for print, television, radio, and online media. The DSA itself has been the subject of much media flattery, as in a June 29th Yahoo News profile headlined, the Democratic Socialists of America show their muscle in New York congressional upset. And again, we're seeing her becoming a media darling again, when the media should be hating her, because she should be pressuring people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi right now. And the squad should be voting as a block to hold up whatever bill that's coming through the pike, unless they get progressive issues. Like, literally, at least get, marijuana. Like, hold this bill hostage coming up for at least, like, marijuana or something. But no, they're not. They're fine with the incrementalist bullshit within this bill. And I hear a lot of people talking about the infrastructure bill as if it's a major, like, they're talking about it. They're literally falling in line with this Joe Biden FDR narrative without even knowing, just because you're not saying it. When you promote this bill like it's such a big game-changing thing, I don't know what to tell you. That's not what it's going to end up being. Because when you operate in a framework of what the incrementalists, of what the neoliberals, of what the capitalists tell you to do, there's always, effects in there that's going to benefit only the rich. The report noted that more than 100 DSA volunteers worked on the Ocasio-Cortez campaign, adding she isn't the first candidate to score a dramatic upset with the help of the leftist organization. And if they have their way, she won't be the last. It later cites DSA or DSA-backed candidates for state legislative races in New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. The corporate media gave wide publicity to Bernie Sanders' announcement that he would travel to Kansas this week with Ocasio-Cortez, the campaign for James Thompson and Brett Welder in the Democratic primaries for Congress set for August 7th. Given the usual vicious anti-socialist bias of the media, the coverage given at DSA, and especially to Ocasio-Cortez, has been friendly. There has been no demonization of the DSA as espousing an alien philosophy or as an advocate of class warfare. The New York Times, in the editorial after the primary, went so far as to hail Ocasio-Cortez as a bright light in a Democratic Party who has brought desperately needed energy back to New York politics. So that's what a lot of right-wingers don't understand. They take, the government, basically, like the intelligence communities and the media, which, they're all intertwined. They take the DSA being allowed in these spheres as like oh, look, they're trying to turn the country communist type of thing, like they're secretly, trying to turn us communist, like on some like fucking Red Dawn type shit. And that's not, that's not the case. Or what was the one with Angelina Jolie? Salt. Like that. No, that's not the case. They're co-opting these movements. They're, giving, they're co-opting the leaders to sheep herd people into capitalism, into the establishment, into, the societal structure that is, capitalism. So this isn't communism and socialism taking over the government. This is capital the political sphere of the government. This is, via the intelligence communities, capitalism and corporatism, fascism, taking over and co-opting socialist and communist movements, in the United States. This has happened. They did it to the black liberation movements back in the 60s, and to the ones that weren't co-opted, they destroyed them, i.e. the Black Panther Party. And we saw what happened. You had gangs like, splinter out from that. A lot of the Black Panther leaders splinter off to become like basically start gangs and shit like that. You saw so much shit happening, with the Black liberation movements of the 60s. Same thing with the anti-war movements. Same thing with the communist socialist movements. If you didn't go along, if you didn't allow yourself to be co-opted and used for one of the establishment parties, you were disappeared. So that's just what it was. In part, of course, that is because both the candidate and the DSA itself are a million miles away from genuine socialist politics. They don't frighten the bourgeoisie in the slightest. But there is something else at work. The legitimization of a specific brand of extremely mild social reformism for the purpose of applying a new coat of paint to the dreary and discredited signboard of the Democratic Party. And that's exactly what AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, used car salesman Rokon, the bitch-ass Jamal Bowman, phony Pramila Jayapal, that's what they're all there to do. That is what they're all there for. And when people like Matt Bender defend them, you're doing the work of the establishment, which in that case, you're no different than the establishment in my fucking mind. And that's what Fiorella was pointing out, and I know a lot of majority report people, that blindly, because I don't see, look, I believe there's people that watch their show probably, but aren't necessarily like the people at, for example, the Capitol rent moratorium protests, like the guys that were confronting Franco and Save the Sea Turtle Samantha that confronted Max Blumenthal. I don't think, everyday people that watch, that watch these shows are like that, are like fervent supporters. But I do feel like once you allow that into your space, your mind space, you tend to adopt that. Just like how, I definitely can say I've adopted a lot of, I guess Jimmy Dore isms, but at the end of the day, my thoughts are my thoughts, which is why I call this fuckery out with these people. And it's like, it has to be called out. You are corrupted. Corruption isn't just taking money from shit. It's so much deeper than that, man. And it's like the fact that you're misleading, not only just, older people coming into politics, you're misleading a whole generation of young people. That's what AOC is doing, and that's what Majority Report, TYT, David Dole, Humanist Report, and all of them are helping that process. And it's sad to see. It's really sad to see, and that's why some of us are so ardent about speaking out against that, because you're indoctrinating a whole new generation into neoliberalism, basically, and incrementalism. This is a necessity to maintain the political monopoly of the corporate-controlled two-party system in America, which then this is touching on what I just said, in which the Democratic Party is supposed to be the left political alternative. After a half a century in which the Democratic Party has completely abandoned any serious proposals for social reform and has worked actively to slash jobs, cut wages, and make conditions of daily life worse, such as a facelift of critical importance for the ruling class. And that's just what it is, man. You see how they kneel in kente cloth while at the same time they're bringing up things like the grand bargain. Barack Obama was trying to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all the social welfare programs to capitulate to Republicans, but not to capitulate to them, because Barack Obama was and is still a fucking Republican. Barack Obama is no different than Donald Trump, who's no different than George Bush, who's no different than Bill Clinton. The DSA does not represent the emergence of socialism, nor is it even a legitimate expression of a growing radical upsurge, as with the campaign of Bernie Sanders. It is a defensive reaction of the Democratic Party and the ruling class, motivated by fear of a genuine movement of the working class. And again, this is why we say Bernie Sanders was a sheep herder. If Bernie Sanders was the real deal, Bernie Sanders, as soon as he got cheated in 2016, he would have ran as a third-party candidate. I know Ralph Nader would have done that shit. Ralph Nader wouldn't have even run as a Democrat, but still. And it's just ridiculous that people were okay with him just rolling up. You even have Matt Bender, even in the debate, was basically saying he was basically saying that Bernie wasn't cheated in 2016 or 2020, where we have actual documents saying that that was the case. This is your brain on neoliberalism. Nothing in the Ocasio-Cortez DSA platform would have raised any eyebrows in the Democratic Party of the 1960s and early 70s. And then that's when Jimmy Carter came in and changed the status quo for the New Democrats, as Thomas Frank calls it, which had to strike an occasional left posture under conditions of the mass radicalization of workers and youth in that period. The DSA wish list, Medicare for all, free college education, a $15 an hour minimum wage, says nothing at all about the socialist transformation of the U.S. and world economy. Not a word about public ownership of the means of production or the confiscation of massive wealth accumulated by the billionaires, because they're not trying to upset the billionaires. Some of them are taking money from the billionaires and are lying that they're not. And most tellingly, not a word about foreign policy. And this is important. The DSA's version of socialism is completely compatible with the defense of the interests of American imperialism around the world, which is why you hear people like AOC saying she defers to party leadership about Venezuela, which is why Rokana's wife has millions invested in defense contractors and all other types of shit that he's profiting off of his job, typical politician shit, which is why you hear Jamal Bowman talking out of both sides of his mouth when it comes to Israel-Palestine. He's a good old boy for Israel. And so many other examples. Ilhan Omar signing on the fucking AIPAC letters after they tried to destroy her career. And then when she made a good comparison between the war crimes and atrocities of the United States, the Taliban, and Israel, she backs off. So yeah, you don't have fighters anymore. That's weak, cowardly bullshit. That's not the fighters that people like Sam Cedar keep saying the squad is. I don't call that fighters. If you can't even stand up on behalf of imperialism, again, I wish Fee or Pasta would have dropped this hammer on them. Where's AOC's Julian Assange bill? Free Julian Assange bill, free Edward Snowden bill, and her whistleblower bill. And just listen for the crickets. We can't even get her to talk about Julian Assange in a positive light. She basically called him a fucking criminal. In that fucking Jeremy Scahill interview. And Jeremy Scahill didn't say shit. Jeremy Scahill, who also gets his whistleblower, his contacts put in prison. Daniel Hill, free Daniel Hill. This is the most critical point. Under conditions of ferocious infighting between rival factions of the ruling elite over foreign policy, particularly in relation to Syria and Russia, they go along with Russiagate too. The alignment of the DSA with American imperialism is intrinsic to its political DNA. The organization was founded in 1982 through the merger of two moribund and anti-communist organizations, the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee of Michael Harrington and the New American Movement, one of the more conservative remnants of the New Left radicals of the 1960s. Harrington and DSOC were political descendants of Shockmanism, the right-wing breakaway from the American Trotskyist movement in 1940, which became the launching pad for many careers in anti-communist politics. Max Shockman himself, after backing American imperialism in the Korean War, ended his days as an advisor to the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO, who is currently helping Uyghurs lose their jobs by pushing this Uyghur genocide narrative. So there's a lot of companies in China that are having to fire people or not, straight up not hire Uyghurs, because if they do, Western companies are being pressured by these activist groups and labor unions and shit like that. They're being pressured to cut ties with those companies that have Uyghurs working with them, because basically they think all the Uyghurs are being subjugated and forced labor. Well, actually, you're actually ruining these people's lives. They're actually losing their jobs and their livelihood because of you. So good job. And literally the companies, so they lay these people off, and then the companies pay large lump sums of charity to these Uyghur American organizations that have ties to the NED and all that shit. So they're literally profiting off of people's pain. They're literally causing distress in people's lives over some trumped up bullshit cooked up by the State Department and intelligence communities, which Donald Trump, by the way, breathlessly repeats. He was so anti-intelligence community, but he repeats the CIA's lies and mysteriously goes along with everything the CIA wants. Bureaucracy that came to oppose the Vietnam War in the late 1960s and early 1970s, because they regarded it as undermining the global interest of American imperialism, as well as destabilizing the United States politically. The Union officials kept the DSA afloat financially, and Harrington, in turn, covered up their betrayals of workers' struggles, as when William Winpisinger of the International Association of Machinists, a DSOC member, isolated and sabotaged the PATCO air traffic controller strike against Reagan in 1981. The DSA is still heavily backed by a section of the AFL-CIO officialdom and acts as their political apologist and left cover. In the wake of the 2016 elections, in which the Sanders campaign revealed a vast audience for socialist politics, something which profoundly shocked the U.S. ruling elite, the decision was made to bring forward the DSA as a catchment area to trap leftward moving young people and contain them within the framework of capitalist politics and the two-party system. Ocasio-Cortez, a Sanders organizer and not a DSA member in 2016, personifies this policy. There is little doubt that since her victory in the primary, Ocasio-Cortez has been taken in hand by politically more experienced elements in the Democratic Party in the capitalist state and informed that a bit of radicalism is all right, but there are definite areas where she must not rock the boat, i.e. imperialism, i.e. the status quo of economics, that type of shit. The newly minted Democratic candidate for Congress has quickly complied, abandoning several of her more left statements from the primary campaign, including the call to abolish immigration, to abolish ICE, as well as her very occasional and tepid criticisms of Israel oppression of the Palestinian people. And she's kind of been falling back from Medicare for all. They're starting to say access to healthcare and universal healthcare, not Medicare for all. So, in a remarkable appearance on the program, firing line on the public broadcasting system, Ocasio-Cortez was almost struck speechless when conservative host Margaret Hoover cited some of her tweets on Israel, including one calling the shooting of unarmed Palestinian civilians in Gaza by Israeli soldiers a massacre, which it clearly was. The first words out of the candidate's mouth were, "I believe absolutely in Israel's right to exist." I am a proponent of a two-state solution. She went on to declare, referring to the November election. And for me, it's not, this is not a referendum, I think, on the state of Israel. You think nothing because you don't give a fuck. She was unable to explain what she meant by referring to the occupation of Palestine by Israeli forces, literally throwing up their hands. Literally throwing up her hands. I'm not the expert on geopolitics on this issue. It doesn't take to be an expert. It's literally, that's fucked up. We probably shouldn't be doing that. We probably shouldn't be facilitating that by financing this basically apartheid ethno-religious state. But no, she's not going to say that. I just look at things through a human rights lens, and I may not use the right words. She laughed nervously. I know this is a very intense issue, she went on to reassure her right-wing interviewer and her audience in the political and national security establishment of her eagerness to toe the line. I'm willing to learn and evolve on this issue. And it's not just on Israel where AOC is willing to learn and evolve. There was literally zero foreign policy content to her campaign against Crowley. She did not in any way appeal to the very deep anti-war sentiments of working-class residents of her district and across the country. As for the DSA organization itself, the magazine with which it is affiliated, Jacobin, and the broader pseudo-left, Milieu, which promotes the DSA, are fully integrated into the foreign policy consensus of American imperialism. They applaud the supposed Syrian revolution, which is why Anna Kasparian feels extremely comfortable at Jacobin, which is a right-wing Islamist insurgency financed by the CIA and armed by Saudi Arabia. They denounce Russia and China as imperialist powers and generally back U.S. efforts to confront these rivals. And again, to people that call China imperialist, don't understand China's policy, their foreign policy. They've never read a lick of, any type of, Chinese history. They just go along with what they heard in documentaries and shit like that. Literally, if you look into China's foreign policy, it's actually very stunning that what they say lines up with what they do. It's very stunning. When I got into the mode of changing my position on China, that was one of the things that blew my mind. Like, I was one of those people that was like, well, what about Africa? When you actually look into the details of a lot of these deals they're cutting with Africa, China's going to cut a deal with you regardless of whether you're, a utopian socialist communist country or you're a brutal authoritarian dictatorship, because they don't believe in enforcing their beliefs on other countries, for better or worse, however you feel about that. I feel that is the way to go, because we've seen the opposite of that with the United States, and China has been a victim of that, which is why they don't do that type of shit. As the WSWS has previously explained, the dominant feature of the 2018 congressional campaign is influx of former military and intelligence operatives seeking Democratic Party nominations, many of them recruited and heavily promoted by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and other Democratic leadership groups. And I talked about this in a more recent World Socialist website article. I may tag that in the end. There is an intrinsic connection between the personnel which the Democratic Party seeks to place in the next Congress and its political platform. The Democratic Party leadership has based its critique of the Trump administration on the unproven allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 elections. And again, this is what Fiorella was talking about in the debate. The AOC, and if Nina Turner got in, and if she ends up winning a seat in the future, they're the future guard. They're going to be the future Chuck Schumers, Nancy Pelosi's. They're the future of neoliberalism. They're the Obama 2.0s. Like literally the establishment is like the Joker. We're sitting here like Batman, and we think we won because we got him hanging off the building and we stopped them from blowing up the ships. But guess what? They turned Harvey Dent. They had their ace in the hole, and that's AOC. A pro-CIA, pro-military orientation lends itself naturally to the recruitment of dozens of ex-CIA and ex-military operatives to run as candidates for Congress. If the Democratic Party regains control of the House of Representatives November 6, military intelligence candidates, not former Sanders supporters, like Ocasio-Cortez, will hold the balance of power. But yeah, so I wanted to read through that, and I hope, I hope Matt Bender. I genuinely, I don't hold out hope for this because I know these people are, shit libs and they're going to go along with the establishment. But man, to God, I hope, some of these people have awakenings because they have such huge platforms. And no, they're spreading misinformation, but I'm not calling for them to be deplatformed. But they'll call for somebody like me or Convo Couch or Fiorella to be fucking deplatformed in a heartbeat. But with that being said, this needs to stop. We need to call this bullshit out and call out AOC and call it out for what it is. That's why I was, so happy to see people like Franco and Max Blumenthal and a couple other people that were there calling out AOC to their faces. They literally, Franco went in the lion's den of the shit libs and was fucking ruthless, man. Like, fuck you. I'm going to say this shit regardless of how you feel. They was like, oh, you're a grifter. Like, that's the word. That's the fucking word they love to use. You're a grifter, this, that, and the third. And then like the whole Max Blumenthal situation, AOC and Cori Bush, everybody there should have been joining Max Blumenthal and calling him out, whether you were going to do it aggressively like Max was or repeat the questions nicely. I feel like you should have a good cop, bad cop, stances in situations like that. So Max Blumenthal goes, you warmonger, this and that. And then when he ignores Max and goes to like AOC or one of those, or Save the Sea Turtle Samantha, could you answer what he said and say it nicely? So, but no, they're politicians, donating their time as if they're not fucking politicians. So with that being said, though, guys, that was kind of a long video, but I wanted to cover that article. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and close the video out there. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Again, I hope you guys are enjoying the new setup, man. I love it, man. I love it. I think it looks good. I could finally bring more of a quality show to you guys. And, I hope you guys are enjoying it. So, again, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And, peace. Easy.